Good afternoon, everyone. And this session is going to be in English. And can I take the end of the session? And I would like to take a few questions if you want to speak in Malayalam. So to get started, it's going to be very brief. I'm going to be very brief, and we would like this session to be more interactive, taking questions. What do you think? Yeah. I would like to dispel the impression, to tell you to explain what is AI in non-technical terms. Okay. In order to understand AI, we need to actually understand what is not AI. So the impression, the notion that comes to your mind when you talk about AI is a Terminator-like person walking into your newsroom or walking into your workplace and just kicking you out, saying, okay, you get out, I'm going to do your job. That is not AI. It's not a person, it's not somebody going to replace you. So like Murali explained in the video, I would like to look at AI as an enabler. Like how, I remember when I got into journalism, there were no computers. Of course, I'm old enough to be there. Then I remember queuing up in front of a fax machine in Beirut, of all places. And fax machine was a big deal then. And writing it on my horrible handwriting and just pushing this. And I remember people talking, is this going to take my job? No, it's not going to take, it didn't take my job. So if you look at AI as an enabler, and that's going to be quite useful, and it's going to be very handy, and it's going to be an empowering tool in your newsroom. So let me give you an example. Okay, he has already mentioned the Washington Post example, and let's not go there. So let me break it down, what can be done in the newsroom before I hand it over to the other panelists. That is, I'm looking at the impression that we get as a senior journalist, as a professor, we are very stupid actually. I was telling them that their students this guy is going to cheat me, that assignment is going to be, ChatGPT is going to write this assignment. ChatGPT is just the tip of the iceberg. It's not just the complete AI universe. It's just one thing in an AI. So AI is all about just empowering, just enabling. It's a tool like any digital tool. A digital tool is as good as what you use it for. Like I always keep telling my students, and when I had to go out for training, a knife was not invented to kill people. Our ancestors invented the knife to actually make life easier for us by chopping vegetables and chopping meat. But if I choose to use that knife to stab him, who would you blame? Me, right? You don't blame the knife. So if someone uses AI for something very, very different purpose, don't blame the technology for that. So that's where digital literacy comes in. Okay, now, what can we do? So let's just break it down to the newsroom. So come down to the newsroom. What I'm looking at in newsroom is, and I was just having a conversation with one of the Mathrubhumi person here. Like, what if you have 100 years of, I was just telling you, Srinivas sir was telling me that all the 100 years data is archived now digitally. I'm thinking, what if you can train an algorithm just with Mathrubhumi content? How would it behave? Okay, AP is actually doing, Associated Press is doing that. Associated Press is, rather than depending on ChatGPT, they are actually training an algorithm only with verified facts and information from that. Okay, from Associated Press. So I'm also thinking of how AI can be used to actually check, to A/B test the headlines. It's very, trust me, because I've been playing with my, just doing this, experimenting with my students. We created some time back, we created a newspaper in 10 minutes with 4 of us. 8-page newspaper using 3 tools. Only one is ChatGPT 4, and 3 tools. We created an 8-page newspaper with fictional content in 10 minutes. And it was fantastic, and there was a discussion in what else can be done. So it's not about replacing. So according to McKinsey figures, it's going to result in 500 job loss of 100 million people, but it's going to create 800 million jobs. So I'm looking at the positive, the brighter side of things. So headline testing is one thing where we can to create different headlines and what works. SEO, so search engine optimization, social media optimization is another thing, and machines do much better than humans. And story ideas, because I teach my students, if you have a story idea, just try to find different angles using different AI tools. Because there is a limitation to human, my mind. So what if I can get 10 different perspectives on one story? How biased is it biased? And rather than just having, maybe no matter how clever I am, how smart I am, I might be able to come up with only 5 ideas. So which is the best thing? Having 10 different perspectives, 5 different ideas. I would go for 10, then from these 10 ideas, I would come up with the 11th idea, which is originally mine. So don't think that AI is writing articles for you or creating videos for you. It's a completely different ball game altogether. It's an enabler. Use this as an enabler for brainstorming. To create, because my students use this to create an outline of story outline. They don't write stories. Okay, so this is my initial thought before I hand over to Adrija or anyone.
Since I'm not a journalist or an editor, I would say Adrija should go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I agree with a lot of things that Devadas said, but not a lot of things as well. So what happens is there is high risk AI and there is low risk AI, as I understand it. And what is low risk AI is basically, you segmenting your work, coming up with SEO headlines, newsletters, etc. Comment moderation. High risk AI is something where you get the AI to write your stories. And that for me is something that I wouldn't do. And I don't think as a practice we should do that. So, and there are lots of reasons for it. Number one reason is that AI is still a system. It's not intelligence. It's human who have put in that intelligence into them, right? So they are biased. They are factually incorrect. And the biggest thing is that we don't know where the sources are from. When AI gives you information, you don't know where the sourcing is from. And as journalists, for us, the sourcing is really important. So I don't think we should be writing stories with AI, but at the same time, there's a lot that one can do with AI. I want to talk about fact-checking with the help of AI before we go on to something else. There are these photos that were created, that are created, deepfake, as we call it, which have different voices in it, or different faces in it. So how do you make sure that that photo is not a deepfake? And AI can help a lot with that. So one of the examples that I can give is of this Fogat sisters, the wrestlers' protest that was happening in Delhi. And when they were picked up, there was an image that was doing the rounds that had them smiling. They were in the police van and they were smiling. That picture was not true. And everybody shared that picture saying that, hey, look, they're smiling. And what we did was we put another picture where they were not smiling into an app called Face Swap. And the smile just appeared. So we do fact checking using a lot of AI tools. So once we know that a tool can help us analyze and determine that, okay, we can use this tool to bring out this picture, that means that this picture is fake, right? And it's easy to make and produce those images. So in the world of fact checking, at least, it's a lot of problem to have AI images. But at the same time, AI is what helps us debunk those images. That's all from me.
So there are multiple schools of thought, right? Like you can look at the positive side of it, the issues that come across with AI, with any technology. Globally, there is panic. There's a lot of excitement. And there are like the good researchers who are warning us what could go wrong with it, or how do we have to look at AI. Now, would a new AI company take over Mathrubhumi entirely? Would it eat into news organizations' news pies? In terms of the revenues? That's quite likely, right? So everyone's now trying to figure out how do we react to this new form of technology. But I think what we need to understand is this is not new, A. These are just algorithms. They have always been with us for the last few decades. What we are witnessing is the scale of this technology has gone up. So if you look at social media, facial recognition and tools like Snapchat, we're always using AI to do interactive media of certain kind, right? So when you look at news, it's one form of media. It could be print, it could be photojournalism, it could be video. Now you're looking at all of this being at the risk of automated. That's the risk that most companies, most organizations are worried about. Some of them are trying to see how they can retrofit them, right? So, and that's where the retraining of journalists as prompt engineers for ChatGPT is also coming. Where how do you question ChatGPT? How do you make it write a story for you, right? So, in all of this, it is indeed creating challenges of fake news. It is creating challenges of profits. It is taking away jobs. Will it create new jobs? Yes. But how do we look at this from an entirely editorial perspective? That's what I want to look at. Where even if an AI is producing the news, who's going to check it before it's published? News as an industry was always regulated. When I say regulated, self-regulated. You had editorial checks, which you don't anymore if you let something like an AI tool publish news. And several organizations in the West have kind of experimented with few sections of their media houses, say obituaries. And now what AI is also doing is and to be very specific, it's generative AI. It's literally making up things that did not exist. And in terms of images, now I do not know which image is a real image. And there have been instances, I think it was also the Hindu, which took generative AI to generate images for their stories. So this was like for representations only, right? So that kind of killed the whole purpose of photojournalism, and photojournalists were concerned how a major media house was trying to just take over generative AI without any serious discussion on its implications to the industry itself. So I think at that level, we do need to talk about what AI is doing to the industry and what sort of practices need to come up, both editorially, in terms of whether fact-checking, whether at the scale at which it's happening. There are a host of these issues, and I don't have an entire answer for you. We know that these issues have existed in the past too. It's not new, right? And the industry has reacted to, say, fake news, right, by bringing fact-checking. But as Rana clearly points out, by the time the fact-checking happens, your damage is done, right? So it's all in the scale, it's all in the distribution. AI is able to do what an entire institution can do in a single hour, right? If an entire institution produces news stories in a single day, AI is able to replace all of the people in 1 hour. It's the scale that's going to become a challenge where we can't verify each of them. And regulation is going to happen whether we like it or not. And it has already come, right, in the forms of IT rules in India, where the state is regulating it. So AI-generated news is something that the industry needs to look to, as in how to regulate it. First pointing it the way you've done it with fact-checking. And understanding these algorithms is something also important, because these are black boxes. We don't know how they exactly function. They are not public, these codes are not public, it's proprietary. Some of the software companies, the organizations which will be very positive about AI, will always ensure that they take away all of your content for free while not respecting the Copyright Act. That's been the major fight with AI now, that big tech has taken over all the content of books, of critical journalism works that major newspaper organizations have done, used it to train their AI, and essentially take over everything that somebody else has produced. Now, the Indian Copyright Act and Copyright Act implementation in India has been very tricky. Okay, but new responses are coming. If you look at what Anil Kapoor has done in Delhi High Court, I don't know if anyone has followed. Anil Kapoor got an order in Delhi High Court saying that nobody can use his voice or bio details to do anything without his permission, right? So I can now make, using AI, make Anil Kapoor say something without giving him any revenue. That's what the threat is all coming to. And regulation is going to happen.
Yeah, what do you think? What is your take on, speaking of regulations? Like in the US, Sam Altman or Tesla, Elon Musk, they're asking the government to interfere, to get involved in regulation. So do you think should be self-regulated or the government should intervene?
See, I think it's a very bad idea if you let the government intervene in news in India. That historically is a bad idea if you let government determine what is the fact now, which is what the whole idea of PIB fact check unit and the IT rules was all about, right? But let's look at how writers in US have been reacting to the AI phenomenon. I don't know how many of you have followed this whole US Hollywood Movie Writers Association's Guild's protest against AI. They recently stopped. They kind of had an agreement with the studios where AI can be used or where AI can't be used, where will be the disclosure of AI. So in terms of regulation, it need not be the state, okay? But there was some sort of understanding that was brought out between the organizations who are funding it, who are owning this, and the producers, the workers, essentially, right? So it's going to be a lot of these factors in terms of the Copyright Act, in terms of who has access to this data. I know you mentioned AP, Associated Press, is trying to build its own generative AI. But it's really, really hard for small organizations, news organizations to do it. Even if Mathrubhumi were to attempt this, right, you have to still depend on what Google, Facebook, or any of these big tech has built. Which is what I think Meredith Whittaker, the CEO of Signal Foundation and also the president at AI Now, she says AI is a surveillance technology. When you looked at the video of, sorry, I just lost the phrase, but personalizing stories. So how do I personalize my stories to my readers, right? So you're essentially saying I'll generate story for each subscriber.
Yeah, particularly Adrija touched upon the newsletter thing.
Yeah, you can't do that without surveillance. Yeah. You can't, unless you understand who your customer is.
It's not humanly possible, yeah.
Yeah. So now you are forced to participate in a surveillance setup where if you want to train your AIs, you want to build this kind of system, you have to surveil your clients, readers. Think of that in today's India. What does that mean, right? Like you are documenting what your readers are reading and then changing accordingly.
I think we do that without AI as well.
Analytics, you're doing that already, right? But the scale at which you're going to now react back in producing content, right? So right now you're only using analytics to understand your viewers. But personalized content is very individual determined. You're not looking at anonymized statistics that Google Analytics gives you, right? You have a trend in Google Analytics. But personalized stories will require you to know that individual very deeply, right? And you are generating your stories on the fly, right? So with interactive AI, generative AI. So there are consequences of these models. I'm not saying we should not adopt it entirely, It's just that you need to be you need to be very clear what you're stepping into, and you have to also understand it's not easy to build them, and the people who design them don't understand it often. Like some of the engineers, for example, they're still dependent on software or models that have been built by tech in Silicon Valley. Indians are going to attempt to copy it, right? ChatGPT and all of these tools have been built with the capacity that Silicon Valley has because they have chips. We don't have them. It's not easy to also produce generative AI within India without having access to GPUs. We don't produce them yet. So there's a host variety of consequences. So
Yeah, I'd like to just bring in before we pass on to move on to Adrija, a couple of examples which would make it very clear how this can be useful in reporting. So what comes to my mind is, say, like she was saying, the technology is increasing in such a fast pace that now there is a new technology called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. You can actually search it RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where we can we can just train an LLM, that is large language model, to verify, to take only verified and give the sources of what the output. You can actually train. That's what he mentioned on prompt engineering. So I would say that prompt engineering is a new literacy. So particularly how to actually train your large language models. Let's say ChatGPT, let's just not use a jargon, say LLM and stuff. How can you actually use this to serve your purpose? The purpose is not to be lazy and write your articles. Let me give you an example. Say BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed actually won a Pulitzer Prize for one story I can remember is from the top of mind is Spice in the Skies. Okay, you can check it, Spice in the Skies. So this particular story is about how many FBI planes are actually surveilling you in real time. And there is a website called Flight Radar 24. It's openly, it's a public database available. And there are tons of information there, and it's not humanly possible to separate, normal passenger planes, freight planes from FBI planes. But BuzzFeed trained the algorithm to identify, to look for only spy planes, small planes. When they take off, you can look it up. It's a fun tool, Flight Radar 24. And they found out that there are 20,000 planes at a time over the sky, FBI planes observing you. Small planes. So this kind of story is not, you can't do that. So how many people do you need to do the stories? Then second example I can think of is, say, for example, there is a new emerging area in journalism called OSINT, that is Open Source Intelligence, OSINT. So people like in Britain, there is an organization called Bellingcat, the kind of investigation they are doing is, because when you have enormous data like Pentagon papers and Pandora papers, we are talking about 1.2 gigabyte, not gigabyte, it's such big data, say terabyte of data. So what do you do with it? It's not humanly possible to sift through all this data set. So you train an algorithm, say, look at the papers, Pandora papers, Panama papers, we are also involved. Indian politicians were also mentioned that. So this committee for investigative journalism in the global community for investigative journalism, consortium for investigative journalism, they trained the algorithm to look for corruption. So when you have financial data in environmental stories, you can say there are now a lot of open source satellite pictures available with the high resolution. For example, I can mention Planet Lab or Maxar Technologies, paid of course. What you can do is you can actually look for illegal mining. There was a story again by I think Al Jazeera about the illegal mining, amber mines in Ukraine. And the Ukraine one, again, one of the New York Times stories about this is an emerging area in journalism using AI in open source investigation. So it's not humanly, when you have so much data, it's not humanly possible to sift through, like old times, when I got my first job in the newsroom, there were 25 proofreaders in my newsroom. Are there proofreaders in newsroom? I don't know whether there are proofreaders anymore. There are more proofreaders than editors and writers in the newsroom. That was long ago. I don't think there are any proofreaders in newsroom anymore. So there were 24 people sitting and just verifying manually. That's gone. That job is gone. Now, what you can do is, it's not possible for any newsrooms now. Newsrooms are getting actually leaner and meaner, I would say. So you need technology, this kind of technology. So, for example, when you have such data, you find out it's not humanly possible, use algorithm, train algorithm. So it's all about, like he mentioned in this, what you put in, what you get out. Okay? So, what goes in, that comes out. And if shit goes in or shit comes out, sorry for my bad language. So that's all about algorithms. So don't blame the algorithm, the AI for that. It's blame us because we humans. No, what is going to, is it going to take away our job? My take is, no, AI is not going to take your jobs, but a person using AI will take your job. That's for sure. Adrija?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we shouldn't be scared of AI. It's something that we should use and learn and understand how it works instead of completely being cynical about it. But one more thing, you know, in the newsroom operation, in digital newsroom especially, we have something called the CMS, right? I don't know how many of you work in newsrooms or use CMS, but the one thing that AP does, while we say that AP uses ChatGPT and AI, etc., but it never publishes the story. It goes into the CMS and then a human will go and check that and then only will it get published. So that's very important, that there is a human eye to every story that we publish. AI may help with investigations. The Panama Papers are a great example, of course. But at the same time, no story should go out in public without human intervention, is what I believe.
We got a question. Can we take questions now? We got a question
Can I make some final comments? I just wanted to give you examples where you can actually use it, right? In terms of understanding a lot of data, big data, we did have a lot of techniques that news organizations have been using for a decade or so, like with data for journalism, right? Where you could go through, court records, where you could go through large chunks of documents, where you can recognize the language, like scan documents, so you're passing them through here, optical character recognition, where there is a set of algorithms that's digitizing the language that's handwritten. So you don't have to now go through your naked eye to all of this if there's like huge
like
volumes of
papers, because you and I don't understand the financial language. And
so
I don't understand them.
These technologies have always existed. Indian newsrooms, some of them or some individuals have been using them, except now that with the ballooning of GPUs, with emergence of this idea of AI, again, what AI is here, to me it's just software and algorithms, but the accuracy has improved, right? The availability of these algorithms and software to even potentially recognize Indian languages has come. So there is a lot of those kind of tools which you can potentially also use to translate stories, maybe, right? The main story is at least written by a human, but the translated story still need to be verified by a human, but still eases out a lot of this. So there are certain tasks that can be automated, that's the word I want to use, with software, but at what scale, how do you do it, that has to be decided. And I'm saying like editorial practices and people, organizations are trying to build these tools have to look into while they even attempt to build them or design them. So it's not just about what the end product is, like how you're building them will essentially determine what your outcome is also.
Yeah, before we take the question, let me give you something that happened a couple of days ago. A student of mine did the story, used ChatGPT for visual storytelling. The story was about a village, a very remote village in Karnataka, and the prompt was, give me 3 visual opening sequences, establishing scenes for a visual story on an old village in Karnataka. And ChatGPT just came up with 5 beautiful ideas about the visual and the angles, the camera, including the camera angles. And how can you make the story more engaging? And what she did was, she, after looking at the 5 examples, she came up with the 6th idea. That is what, it's not, you don't ask it to write something, ideas, just brainstorming and the idea generation. I find it a fantastic tool. We are talking about a visual story, okay? Now, before we have a question from Jinu Joseph. The question is, while there is a lot of speculation about generative AI images being used to alter narratives, it can be used as a tool, question narration with a disclaimer as being in all generated images, just like file photos, representative image. Isn't it just adoption that is required? Like any view, tech which has been presented to humanity over our existence. What is the question here? I don't get the question. Jinu, who? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is a matter of everything. Who do you want to answer?
This question was asked in the initial part, but it has been discussed quite
in detail. So would you like to answer again?
no.
So.
You can actually, to cite an example, right? You can actually use AI to generate, say, diagrams, scientific diagrams. Okay?
Yeah,
Still need to be verified though. Human heart, please do it.
Yeah, one more thing. This particular story I was talking to you about this Karnataka village, the opening sequence for Karnataka, the story on Karnataka village. And she also asked ChatGPT one more clever thing. Push the thing a little bit more. Can you search, not ChatGPT, on Bing? Bing now allows you access to real-time internet. So she asked Bing, copy-pasted this ChatGPT response on Bing and said, suggest me a storyboard for this story. And it came out with beautiful story, just pictures. These are the potential shots, and you can take with DALL-E 3. It's amazing. These are on, these are not freely available now on Bing chatbot. So this is why this comes to use. You can actually visualize what you're going to shoot before you go and shoot for a visual story.
So it's an editorial decision at the end of the day. That's what I'm trying to say. You guys have to bring them up. Hindu chose to actually experiment it very briefly, but I don't think they actually.
What is your advice to the editorial board? What would you advise them?
I think there are editorial policies that newsrooms already have, right?
No, there's also, I think, with use of AI image, there's a chance of copyright violation. We are already seeing that a lot of it,
get
right?
This image, get this image.
DALL-E, all of that, they are facing a lot of copyright violation. But does that mean we don't use it at all? No, that's not true at all.
I'm talking about storyboarding, storyboarding for a visual
Neiman
story.
Lab uses it on their images, and they say that this is where we've got the image from. So, and Neiman Lab is, considered to be a good technological global tech site. So, I think we can use it, but it depends on editorial standards.
Any more questions? Ranjini? Yeah.
There is no question that AI has huge potential, even within the news industry. But I am particularly worried about the surveillance part that you mentioned. I understand there is a need. Like I remember doing a story when there was rubella measles rubella vaccination. There was a contamination issue somewhere. So from there we could understand people wanted to know what exactly is measles rubella vaccination. So there was an explainer, there was the need of an explainer there. So that we can, by surveilling our readers, we sort of understand that, okay, this is something that our audience want to know about. But there is another part to it. When we start surveilling our audience, you see that, okay, this part of the country wants to read a lot of right-wing news. This part of a country or a certain age group wants to read something else. So that becomes basically content production then. it defeats the purpose of news. So my question is, like, how do we regulate that? Do we need regulation? Because we often do not want governments to interfere, but how do we regulate that? What is a strategy to address that kind of, like, news media becoming content producers, just content producers? Like,
if I may answer, I don't have an answer proper. I would be actually lying if I tell you I have an answer to this. So no matter what you use, like I said at the beginning, this is just a technology. So in particularly newsrooms, journalism is actually, you have to stick to all the rigors of traditional journalism. This is just a tool. It's not a journalist. This technology is not a journalist. So I think if you just stick to the traditional and the rigors of traditional journalism, that is facts. Facts are sacred, sacred facts. You stick to sacred facts and the ethics of traditional journalism. I think that is the answer to this, rather than somebody just trying to impose regulations on that. I don't know. I don't have a specific answer to that. Do you?
See, if you look at the history of media in India, post-90s especially, right? Like how technology has evolved media in India and how it has also affected society, right? The government has always tried to regulate it, especially if it's foreign funded. There is a form of regulation. It's not that it doesn't exist. And there are also market factors. Economy still determines what gets reported and what doesn't. And so does social factors, right? Who you are as a writer still determines probably what stories you want to write. So it's always been there. It's not new. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, the only concern is the volume.
Mm-hmm.
One question is there. Okay. I have already published one article about big data. My question: how AI is used for transforming news gathering process from automatic content generation to data analysis and fact checking. So some issues is there for data set is matching, not matching. Some issues is there fact checking. That is one is a problem is there. How overcome this kind of data checking issues? So that is my question. Data set is different for AI is the imitation of real world entity. Sometimes data set are different for different entities is there. So fact checking, is this any difficulty for occurring this kind of situation?
So yeah, I think I want to explain the problem, probably simplify it further. There are two images on my laptop or on a screen, image A and image B. To a human eye, both image A and B are same. But one of them has been manipulated with an AI, right? Even though they'll look very similar to human eye, you can use AI to manipulate things for different reasons. For malicious purposes, somebody could send you the same image with a code of spyware attached to it, or for whatever requirements, right? Now, from a purely fact-checking perspective, does AI bring issues in determining, how do you now determine what's an actual, whether this image was generated by an AI or originally made, right? I think we are seeing this issue already in Indian political debates too. If you look at what happened in Tamil Nadu with their current IT minister, PTR, I hope some of you followed that, where some of his audio calls were put out in the public. Some of them were genuine audio calls and some of them were manufactured. Now, they had to send this to some lab to determine what parts were real, what parts were manufactured, right? So, to someone who heard him say these things, it sounded real, but it wasn't. So, the capacity to do forensics, okay, that's what it is. Whether you look at any form of scientific crime, in this case it was a cyber crime if it was manipulated with, right? You need cyber forensics. And there are institutions in India, private companies who are involved in cybersecurity work who do this. But now with the role of AI in journalism, if every journalist has to become a cybersecurity expert, forensic expert, it's going to be a challenge in itself, which is why your part of your fact-checking teams will probably have to hire a mix of people who have this background or train them. You can't train every journalist on this, which is why you'll have your units in large organizations at least, hopefully.
All right. I think we're at the end of the session. Is there anything else you would like to share? Any of the speakers? Can we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'll be very biased if I tell you, just embrace it, don't resist it.
Can I make one last
Please,
comment?
please.
Sorry. There's a lot of money in this. As
Yeah.
Josie Joseph said, like, there's a lot of under-reporting, right?
Particularly learn prompt engineering.
Okay. I really don't like that word democratization because it's often confused with democracy, but the ability of access to these new forms of technologies is indeed giving people new ways to look at things.
And it's actually turned journalism exciting again.
So if you can use this to produce more content, more stories, then there's more revenue. As the volume is higher, technically it's much easier for smaller organizations to produce news.
You mean we can do more work with better machines?
Yes, it's all efficiency in that sense. You just have to ensure your editorial practices are in the right. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Srinivas. Thank you, Adrija. And thank you, Devadas.